Every spring, the fruit tree section at the garden center fills up with homeowners who want the same thing. A backyard that produces real food, real fruit, the kind of abundance that makes the property feel like something more than just a yard. And every spring, most of those homeowners walk away without buying anything. Because the trees are big. Because the tags say things like, needs a pollinator and requires regular pruning and full-size tree reaches 25 feet. Because the whole enterprise of growing fruit suddenly feels like a project that requires a large property, years of patience, and expertise that most people do not have. They leave the fruit tree section and buy more annuals. And the dream of a producing backyard gets postponed for another year. What the garden center display almost never shows. What the nursery industry has very little financial incentive to prominently feature is that every single fruit tree available in that section also exists in a dwarf or semi-dwarf form that grows perfectly well in a large container, on a patio, a deck, or even a balcony. These are not diminished versions of the trees in the ground. They are the same trees, the same fruit, the same flavor, producing at the same time of year in a form that fits into any outdoor space regardless of how small it is. And the fruit they produce is identical to what the full-size tree would produce because the fruit quality comes from the variety, not the size of the tree. 7 fruit trees are on this list. Every one of them produces real harvestable fruit in a container. Every one of them is available at garden centers across America right now. And make sure to stay until the very end of this list, because the 7th tree is one that almost no American homeowner thinks of as a container plant. And it produces more fruit per square foot of space occupied than almost any other edible plant available in American horticulture. That information is coming. Stay for it. Tree 1, Dwarf Meyer Lemon. The container classic that produces year-round. The Meyer lemon is the fruit tree that converts the most skeptics. People who have never considered growing their own citrus, who live in climates where lemon trees cannot survive outdoors year-round, who have no room for a tree in their yard. They encounter a mature Meyer lemon in a container, loaded with fragrant white blossoms and ripening yellow fruit simultaneously, and something changes. The tree that seemed impossible for their situation suddenly seems not just possible, but necessary. Because nothing that can be purchased at a grocery store tastes like a Meyer lemon picked ripe from a tree that has been growing in a pot on a sunny porch. And once that flavor is experienced, the idea of going back to store-bought citrus becomes genuinely difficult. Smart gardeners know that the Meyer lemon is the most forgiving of all the citrus varieties for container culture, and this forgiveness is what makes it the entry point for the container orchard. Unlike true lemons, which have a tart, almost aggressive acidity that requires perfect growing conditions to express well, Meyer lemons are a natural hybrid between a lemon and a mandarin orange. This heritage gives the fruit a sweetness and a floral quality that makes it delicious eaten out of hand, not just used in cooking, and it gives the tree a constitution that handles the imperfect conditions of container life better than its pure lemon relatives. The tree is less demanding about soil chemistry, more tolerant of the occasional mist watering, and more willing to bloom and fruit in the slightly inconsistent conditions that containers create. In climates from Zone 8 through Zone 11, the American South, the Gulf Coast, California, and the Pacific Northwest, Meyer lemon can live outdoors in its container year-round, producing flowers and fruit in an almost continuous cycle that keeps something interesting happening on the tree through every month of the year. In colder climates from Zone 7 northward, the container moves indoors when temperatures drop below freezing to a sunny south-facing window, a heated garage with grow lights, or a bright sunroom, and moves back outside when spring arrives. The annual migration is simple, and the reward is worth every bit of effort. Real lemons, grown at home, in a climate that was never supposed to support them. Tree 2, Dwarf Apple, the 2-variety secret that unlocks the harvest. The apple tree is the fruit tree that most American homeowners most want, and most frequently talk themselves out of. And the reason they talk themselves out of it is almost always the pollination requirement. Apple trees need a second variety nearby to produce fruit. Two trees with overlapping bloom periods, close enough for bees to carry pollen between them. In the imagination of most homeowners, this means two large trees requiring significant space, significant infrastructure, and significant years of waiting before a single apple appears. The container reality is completely different. Two dwarf apple trees in containers on a patio, each one a manageable 5 to 6 feet tall, can be placed within feet of each other during bloom season to ensure cross-pollination, and both can be moved, repositioned, or stored as needed through the rest of the year. The pollination requirement that seemed like an obstacle is solved by the mobility of the container. The apple varieties that perform best in containers are the true dwarf selections, grafted onto dwarfing rootstocks, specifically the M9 and M27 rootstocks that limit tree size to 4 to 6 feet, regardless of how vigorously the variety would grow on its own roots. These are not the same trees as the full-size orchard apples, even when the variety name is identical. The rootstock determines the ultimate size, the speed of fruiting, and the root volume requirements, and the dwarfing rootstocks produce trees that begin fruiting in their second or third year, rather than the 5 to 7 years typical of standard-sized apple trees. The homeowner who plants a dwarf apple this spring may be eating apples from that tree by next fall. The weight that seemed measured in years is actually measured in a single growing season. For container apple culture, the variety selection that most reliably produces the largest and most flavorful fruit includes Honeycrisp for the sweetness and texture that made it the most popular apple in American grocery stores, Fuji for the dense, complex sweetness that outperforms what is available commercially, and Cox's Orange Pippin for the aromatic, old-fashioned flavor that supermarket apple breeding has almost entirely abandoned. Any two of these planted together in containers on the same patio will cross-pollinate successfully, fruit within 2 to 3 years of planting, and produce apples that taste demonstrably better than anything available at retail. Because homegrown fruit is allowed to ripen fully on the tree, a luxury that commercial apple production cannot afford. Tree 3. Dwarf Fig. The ancient tree that asks for almost nothing. The fig is the fruit tree that most Americans have never considered growing, and the ones who discover it as a container plant consistently describe the experience as one of the most rewarding things they have ever done in the garden. The reasons for this reaction are multiple and compounding. The fruit, eaten fresh from the tree at full ripeness, is so dramatically better than any dried or commercially processed fig that it seems almost like a different food. The tree itself is beautiful, the large, distinctive lobed leaves creating a Mediterranean aesthetic that makes even a single potted fig look like the centerpiece of a sophisticated outdoor living space. And the care requirements are so minimal that experienced fruit growers sometimes joke that the main challenge with figs is resisting the urge to do more. What makes the fig so perfectly suited to container culture is the same characteristic that makes it the oldest cultivated fruit tree in human history. It is extraordinarily adaptable. Figs have been grown in containers since ancient Rome, not as a novelty, but as a practical solution to exactly the climate challenge that most American gardeners face. How to grow a Mediterranean fruit tree in a climate that periodically freezes. Container culture solved this problem 2,000 years ago by making the tree portable. It lives outdoors in the warmth of spring, summer, and fall, and moves to a protected location before hard freezes arrive. The tree goes dormant in winter, requiring no light and very little space, and emerges from dormancy in spring, ready to produce the summer crop that makes the whole enterprise worthwhile. The fig varieties that perform best in containers include Brown Turkey for its reliable heavy crops and cold tolerance that makes it the most widely adaptable choice across American climates, Black Mission for the intensely sweet, jammy flavor and the beautiful dark skin that looks as good as it tastes, and Celeste for the small, incredibly sweet fruit and the compact growth habit that makes it the most practical container choice for smaller spaces. All three varieties are self-fertile, no pollinator required, which eliminates the two-tree requirement that complicates container apple and pear culture. One tree, one container, one sunny spot, and the fig delivers its extraordinary fruit without asking for anything that the gardener cannot easily provide. Here is the moment in this list to pause and say something directly to the homeowners watching this video who have wanted to grow their own fruit for years but have assumed their property is too small, their climate is too cold, or the learning curve is too steep. None of those assumptions are true for container fruit trees. The patio with space for 2 chairs has space for 2 fruit trees. The climate that freezes every winter can grow lemons, figs, and citrus in containers that move indoors when temperatures drop. The learning curve for container fruit is gentler than almost any other form of food gardening because the variables, soil, water, nutrition, are all contained and controlled in a way that in-ground growing never allows. Drop a U.S. state or hardiness zone in the comments right now, because gardeners in the same region are watching this video and figuring out the same container solutions for the same climate challenges. Tree. 4. Dwarf peach, the summer luxury. That fits on any porch a peach picked ripe from the tree on a hot July morning and eaten standing in the garden. The juice running down the wrist. That experience is so different from the hard, flavorless peaches available in most American grocery stores that gardeners who grow their own peaches consistently describe it as one of the most satisfying rewards in all of food gardening. Commercial peaches are picked unripe to survive the shipping and storage process that gets them from orchard to store. Homegrown peaches are picked when they are actually ripe, when the flesh has softened to that perfect yielding texture and the sugar content has reached its peak, and the flavor difference between those two states is the difference between a peach and the idea of a peach. Dwarf peach trees, particularly the genetic dwarf varieties like Bonanza, Pix Z, and El Dorado, are among the most naturally suited fruit trees for container culture because their compact size is a genetic characteristic of the variety itself, rather than the result of dwarfing rootstock. These trees reach 4 to 5 feet tall at maturity and produce full-sized, full-flavored peaches on their compact frames in containers as small as 15 gallons. They bloom in spring with the same vivid pink flowers as their full-sized counterparts, a display so beautiful that many container orchardists grow them as much for the spring bloom as for the summer harvest. And they require no more maintenance than any other container plant receiving regular water and seasonal fertilizing, the chill hour requirement that limits peach growing. In warm climates, peach trees need a certain number of hours below 45 degrees Fahrenheit each winter to bloom and fruit reliably the following season has been addressed in modern breeding with low-chill varieties that produce abundantly in climates as warm as Southern California and Florida. Tropic snow and Florida prints fulfill their chill requirements in climates where standard peach varieties would fail entirely, opening container peach culture to homeowners across the American South and Southwest, who assumed peaches were simply not for their climate. Tree. 5. Dwarf pear. The long-season producer, pear is the fruit that most Americans buy and most American homeowners never think of growing. And this oversight costs them one of the finest eating experiences available in the home garden. A pear grown at home and allowed to ripen properly, picked at the right moment, stored correctly for a few days to complete the ripening process, and eaten at peak has a buttery, floral sweetness and a melting texture that commercial pears, picked hard and cold stored for months, never achieve. The difference is as dramatic as the difference between a homegrown tomato and a grocery store tomato. And for exactly the same reason. Commercial production optimizes for durability and shelf life, not for the eating experience that the fruit is actually capable of delivering. Dwarf pear trees in containers bring this exceptional eating experience to any outdoor space, and they bring two additional qualities that make them particularly valuable in the container orchard. The first is longevity. Pear trees are among the longest-lived fruit trees in cultivation, producing abundantly for decades in conditions that would exhaust shorter-lived fruit crops. A dwarf pear tree planted in a container this season, properly cared for and repotted as it matures, will be producing fruit for 20, 30, or more years. The second quality is fall interest. Pear foliage turns beautiful shades of red and orange in autumn, giving the container tree a seasonal ornamental contribution that extends its value beyond the harvest season into the months when the fruit is gone. Like apples, pears benefit from cross-pollination with a second variety, and the same container solution applies to dwarf trees in containers on the same patio. Positioned close together during bloom season, provide the cross-pollination that maximizes fruit set without requiring the space that in-ground pear trees demand. Bartlett and Bosc are the classic combination that most gardeners recognize from the grocery store, but the container orchard is the perfect place to grow the varieties that commercial production has largely abandoned. Camas for the richest flavor, Seckel for the tiny, incredibly sweet fruit that earns the nickname sugar pear, and Moonglow for the disease resistance that makes it the most reliable choice in humid climates. Tree 6, Dwarf Kumquat, the ornamental fruit tree that earns every inch thee. Kumquat is the fruit tree that earns its place in the container orchard twice over, once as a producing food plant and once as one of the most visually striking ornamental trees available for container culture. The glossy deep green foliage provides a rich, tropical-looking backdrop through every season. The fragrant white flowers that appear in summer fill the surrounding area with a scent comparable to the finest orange blossom. And the fruit, small, oval, bright orange globes that appear in fall and persist through winter, creates a display so beautiful and so unexpected that most people who see a kumquat tree and fruit assume it is a decorative ornament rather than a real, edible fruit. It is completely real, entirely edible, and the experience of eating it, skin and all, the sweet outer layer and the tart inner flesh combining, in a single bite, is one of those discoveries that changes the way a person thinks about fruit. The kumquat's cold hardiness is the quality that makes it the most practically useful citrus for container gardeners in temperate climates. Where Meyer lemon requires protection below approximately 25 degrees Fahrenheit, kumquat tolerates temperatures down to 15 to 18 degrees before suffering significant damage. Cold hardiness that extends its practical range significantly further north than most citrus, and that reduces the urgency of moving it indoors during brief cold spells. In Zone 8 and warmer, kumquat can live outdoors year-round in a container, its glossy foliage and bright orange fruit providing ornamental interest through the winter months when most other garden plants have gone dormant. In Zone 7, brief cold snaps can be managed with frost cloth and container mobility, allowing kumquat to spend most of the year outdoors, even in climates that technically exceed its hardiness range. The self-fertile characteristic that kumquat shares with figs, it requires no pollinator, no second tree, no attention to variety compatibility, makes it the ideal single-tree choice for container orchardists who want citrus fruit without the complexity of managing pollination. One tree producing fruit every year from late fall through early spring, covering the months when the rest of the container orchard is dormant and giving the outdoor space color and interest through the season when it is most needed. Tree 7, the one that produces more fruit per square foot than almost anything else. Dwarf mulberry, the forgotten abundance. This is the tree that was promised at the beginning of this video. The mulberry, specifically the Illinois ever-bearing mulberry, or the dwarf ever-bearing mulberry, varieties that have been selected and developed specifically for their extraordinary productivity in small spaces and their willingness to be kept compact through container culture or regular pruning. What makes the mulberry the nuclear option on this list is a productivity per square foot of container space that no other fruit tree approaches, a fruit quality that commercial production has entirely ignored for logistical reasons that have nothing to do with flavor, and a self-sufficiency in the container that makes it the lowest maintenance entry on this list. The reason mulberries are not found in grocery stores is not because the fruit is not good. It is because the fruit is too good, too soft, too perishable, too impossible to pick unripe and ship without damage. Mulberries ripen over an extended period rather than all at once, requiring repeated picking over several weeks. They are so delicate when ripe that they cannot be transported without bruising. These are the characteristics that make commercial production impractical and home growing perfect. The fruit that the grocery store cannot sell is the fruit that drops into the hand at perfect ripeness. That needs to travel exactly 0 miles from tree to mouth. That can be eaten immediately or frozen in quantity for smoothies, baked goods, and preserves through the rest of the year. A dwarf mulberry in a 20-gallon container, properly fertilized and regularly watered, can produce 10 to 20 pounds of fruit in a single season. An abundance that exceeds what most gardeners expect from a tree this size, and that transforms the container orchard from a novelty into a genuine food production system. The fruit appears over a period of 4 to 6 weeks in early summer, providing a continuous harvest rather than a single overwhelming abundance that exceeds what a household can use. And through the rest of the year, the tree earns its container space as an ornamental, the large, heart-shaped leaves creating a lush, tropical presence on the patio that makes the entire outdoor space feel more verdant and more generous. Plant one this season and prepare to spend June doing something that most American homeowners have never experienced: walking out to the yard every morning with a bowl and coming back with enough fruit to feed the family for breakfast. 7 fruit trees. 7 permanent producers that fit into the spaces most homeowners already have: a sunny patio, a south-facing deck, a spot by the back door that gets afternoon light. The container orchard that the nursery industry's display tables make seem impossible is available to any homeowner with a large pot, a bag of potting mix, and the willingness to try something that the fruit tree section has always made look more complicated than it actually is. If this video helped, hit subscribe to join this gardening community and watch the next video on screen to keep building the producing, beautiful outdoor space that most homeowners only dream about.